All right, welcome back to the Financial Shepherd Podcast. My name is Joshua Casey Garland, certified financial planning professional and owner of Shepherd Wealth Management. Ezra, welcome back to the studio. Excited today, right before Christmas. What's going on with you, man?
Oh, looking forward to got a big trip planned coming up.
Yeah, you're going to Hawaii for a little bit?
Going to Hawaii for a couple weeks, visiting a good friend.
Nice.
Taking it easy.
Nice.
Make a stop in LA on the way back. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. So we've had the Christmas tree up basically since Halloween was over.
Oh, right on.
And my little one's into the Elf on the Shelf, a little 4-year-old. She named the elf Tina. So Tina's been dropping little gifts and all kinds of cool stuff. And she's very excited. She's got her advent calendar up to date.
Of course. You got to keep that thing square up.
Yeah. And I know that Santa and grandparents have really hooked her up this year. So
oh, wow.
That was definitely really cool. Very excited to have some family over. Going to be pretty quiet for us. I'm not sure what you're going to do in Hawaii for Christmas, man, but I'm sure the weather's going to be nice.
Yeah, even if it's not, I'll be in Hawaii. So, the palm tree will be decorated with care. And,
open a Corona, I guess.
I'm going to go straight for the Mai Tai on Christmas Day. Just me and the sunshine and the swimming suit. That's it.
Happy for you, man. But yeah, happy holidays to everyone that's out there. Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is that you celebrate. If you're a Festivus for the rest of us kind of person, I'll probably watch that on Christmas as well. I love the Seinfeld episodes there. So yeah, I'll probably do a lot of that. Just hanging out, family, watching bunch of old Christmas movies and, just reminiscing on the year, which was a really good year, even though it's been a very difficult year from a market standpoint.
I'm kind of in the camp of good riddance of 22. So that's why I'm taking my ginger self to Hawaii for a couple of weeks.
Don't blame me, man.
What do you got a favorite Christmas movie?
I have been asked that a million times. I got to go to the Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, that's a classic. I mean, I think as far as like all-time classics, like a list, not that one's better than the other, but if you had to put like the GOATs together, that's one of them, I think.
Yeah.
I
go on and on. I mean, my wife has different ones than I love, but she tends to go the more old school route.
Yeah.
I prefer a lot of the newer ones like Elf. That's a really good one.
I mean, that's already, I think, an all-time classic because it's probably like 15 years old at this point.
Yeah. It's really cool stuff.
You got the Rudolph, the animated, the stop motion Rudolph.
Oh, yeah.
Christmas Vacation, Christmas Story.
Yep.
And then Grinch, you got to put that in there.
Yeah, all of them.
I'm a big White Christmas fan, big Die Hard fan. I consider that a Christmas movie, despite the recent proclamations by the show or the movie runners.
I'm going to try to get them all in.
Yeah, Bad Santa, Gremlins.
Also good. Of course, we got football and basketball on for days during the weekend here. So, yeah, a lot to look forward to. A lot of fun stuff. And I'm really pumped about this particular episode today. So usually I come in, I got a ton of notes, done all this research and work. But the reality is today I'm just going to riff a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing research all year long. Night. A little bit of an open mic. I got some talking points here just to make sure I don't, misquote somebody or put out a incorrect statistic or number out there. But today's going to be a little bit of a riff. And for those that may be catching the show for the first time, we've got a bunch of new subscribers to the show. So thank you all very much. You can go to my website, shepherdwm.com. There's a whole bunch of information about myself, my background, our firm. But at the upper left-hand corner of that website, there's a little YouTube spot that you can click on, a little YouTube logo, as well as Spotify and Facebook and others. But if you click on the YouTube one, it'll take you to all the videos that we posted all year long. You can watch anything you'd like to. And would love you to subscribe to the show. And if you hit the little notification button, you'll get a little notification on your phone or maybe even your email every time we post a new show. So really appreciate everyone's support this year. I know a lot of people like the show because we do a little bit differently, right? We talk about what is actually going on, in the here and now from an economic standpoint. I've talked about the Fed all year long, of course. We talked about the stock market. We talked international. We talked interest rates, inflation, of course. But we're not just providing you with the information that you can already, turn your TV on and get it from any news outlet, right? What we try to do is say, okay, this is what happened. This is why it's happening. And more importantly, tie some historical context around it. That way we can begin to make some intelligent decisions of what should we do with this information. Should we buy, sell, hold, rebalance, so on and so forth. So that's the reason why we do the show, is to give you a little bit more than what the actual news channels do, because the news is designed to play into human emotion, right? Which is fear and greed. We talked about it all year long. I always will talk about it. This field of behavioral finance. You can actually get a PhD from every major university around the country, if not the world these days, on this topic. It's fascinating, and really, in a nutshell, all it describes is how human beings, that's what the market is a whole bunch of human beings around the world. How do we make decisions with our money? Is it logical or is it emotional? What behavioral finance has taught us is that we feel losses twice as much as we actually feel good about making money.
Right.
Now that's huge. And the news knows that. It plays into that. I'm not knocking the news. That's what their job is. But what we like to be able to do is provide a fresh little take around that, because the reality is because we're human beings, what Warren Buffett has famously said is the one thing we know for sure is that human beings do not learn from history, which is why I like to provide some historical context around these things, because this is not the first time that we've been through something like this, and certainly will not be the last. So if we can learn from what history has to say and understand, how that may affect us both in the short, intermediate, and long term, we can start to make some more tactical decisions with our money and our portfolio and our finances. So that's the reason for the show. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback all year long. I'm super excited about 2023 already, but we got a ton to talk about today. I know we got some viewer questions already. Like I said, I'm going to riff a little bit, so bear with me. Sit back, buckle up, grab a cup of coffee or hot chocolate, whatever it is you're drinking these days at around noon, on a holiday week coming up here. So enjoy this, because I've had a few days to think about this, so I'm ready to go. So basically, on the 12th of December, not that long ago, we got the most recent inflation report. So let me give you the information here. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, rose just 0.1% from the previous month. That's an increase of 7.1% year over year, compared with what economists expected, a 0.3% rise. So this inflation report came in lower than expectation. That is very good for the market, okay? Core CPI rose 0.2% on the month and 6% on an annual basis. That was compared with a 0.3% expectation that economists had. So when that news hit the wire, right, 8:30 in the morning on the 12th of December, the pre-market indices just took off like a rocket. I think I saw the NASDAQ was up almost 4% when I was getting all this information during that morning. S&P 500 was way up there. Dow Jones was up as well. I mean, everything was just looking like it was going to go gangbusters. One of those, what they call a face-ripping, type of rally, which is what I kind of expected all year long. So for those of you that may be checking out the show for the first time, go to the YouTube channel, check out some prior episodes. I want to say around March, April-ish, we were talking about how we would expect a rally to start itself sometime in October, which that happened. We also talked about how inflation was likely going to be coming down based on leading economic indicators right around October. That happened in November. And for the first time all year, we had back-to-back inflation reports month to month that came in lower than expected. So those are really good things. And that's something I was very, very excited about. So what I did, right as the market kind of opened, went into all the client accounts individually and started to do some rebalancing. So the most money that we made throughout the year was in energy. Of course, that's the only sector, if you just look at all 11 sectors, that was the only sector that was positive for all of 2022 in a very big way, like plus 50% kind of way. So we took some gains out of that. And then healthcare was also pretty good. That's the second largest sector in the S&P 500. So we took some profits out of healthcare. United Health Group, the XLV, which is an ETF that tracks the healthcare sector, and maybe a few other positions. And we took some profits out of that. So we didn't liquidate at all. And we moved that money into equities. And primarily the focus was technology, given that technology at that time, when the report came out, the NASDAQ was the worst performing sector by a long shot. That's the largest sector. It's the most important sector. It affects every other sector within the S&P 500. So the thought was, okay, not only is the tech sector really important, but it's also beat up the most. Therefore, it should have the best recovery. And the pre-market was giving me all the signs of that. The NASDAQ was up way more than all the other major averages. So went into it with all the right data, I have been data dependent all year long. And now I'm going to use the word data dependent a few times today because it's a little frustrating to me that the Fed, although they've talked about being data dependent, we're going to keep raising rates and we're going to let the data tell us when we need to slow down. Well, I'm about to go into some data, actual facts that I have to believe that the Federal Reserve not only has access to, but they have the ability to get people on the phone that I would never be able to get on the phone. So there's no reason why somebody like myself here in Florence, Kentucky, with a registered investment advisory firm is able to see some of the things that apparently the Fed is either choosing not to see for whatever their reason may be, or they're just flat out looking at the wrong pieces of information here. So this is henceforth the riff that I hope you all enjoy very, very much. All right. So let's take a look at the Fed's forecast for the Fed funds rate. And let's go back to December of 2021. So they come out with this summary of economic projections. They call it the dot plot. All right. So the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, anticipated a year-end 2022 federal funds rate of 0.9%. What that's saying is at the end of 2021, Federal Chairman Jerome Powell and his associates we're talking about only raising interest rates by 80 basis points or 0.8%. We've raised interest rates 400 basis points in 2022. Most of that happened within like 6 months from June to now.
Even with the front row seat watching it happen, hearing those numbers back is still
crazy.
It just hits me like a train.
So everybody's freaking out. I'm going to get into why everybody's freaking out here in a second. The market's been selling off ever since the Fed came out on the 13th, so the next day after the inflation report came out at 2:30, they were like, hey, we're going to raise 50 basis points. Everybody expected that. That's not why the market kind of sold off. The reason why it sold off hard is because he was like, well, it's encouraging that we had 2 reports month over month of inflation going down. And he specifically said the work that we've done is in fact working. That's kind of obvious based on the data. He would further go on to say, our work is not done yet. We expect 3 more interest rate hikes into 2023. And that kind of is the main catalyst for why the market sold off so hard. And we'll explain why that is here in a second. But I tell you that because the Fed is very unlikely to follow through with 3 interest rate hikes in 2023. I mean, hell, if they told you they were only going to anticipate raising rates by 80 basis points at the beginning of 2022, and they ended up doing 400, that would tell you that a lot of the time their anticipation of what interest rates are going to look like is probably not actually going to be accurate.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll talk about why that is here in just a little bit. But the main thing that I would point to as actual as close to physical evidence as one can have with something like this is look at the 2-year Treasury yield. All right. And the reason why I say that is after the Fed in December of 2021 was saying, hey, we're only going to do 80 basis points of hikes. Well, the 2-year Treasury in January of 2022 had already moved up to 0.9. Mm-hmm. Basically what the Treasury was saying, the bond market was saying, hey, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell and colleagues, you're way behind the 8 ball. The 2-year Treasury is basically where the Fed is going to end up. All right, so keep that in the back of your mind right now because the 2-year Treasury is about 4.2%. It's under 4.3. So the 2-year was screaming at the time in January of 2022 that the Fed was way behind the curve, and they were 100% right about that. Now, if we get to June, which is where June of 2022 is where we saw the Fed's first 75 basis point hike, right? And then they ended up doing 3 more of those until we got to December here recently where they did 50 basis points. So here's the setup in 2022. The 2-year had said the Fed needed to step up the pace of hikes. So notice that the spread of the 2-year less the Fed funds rate jumped on June 9th. And this is right before the Fed increased by 75 basis points. So the 2-year is where the Fed is likely going to be headed. It's been right, not in this particular, it's not only been right in this year and last year, it's been right and pretty much every other time in history that you want to go look back and see when the Fed was raising or lowering rates. The 2-year was ultimately where they ended up being. So the bond market kind of sniffs this out before pretty much every other part of the market is. Now, currently, on December of this year, the Federal Reserve sees the federal funds rate by year end 2023 at 5.1%. All right, that's what they anticipate, what they've been calling terminal rate to be by the year end 2023. However, the current Fed funds rate is at 4.375%. This would imply that the Fed's going to increase rates 3 times at 25 basis points a clip to get to what they're calling their terminal rate of 5.1% by the end of the year 2023. However, as I've just mentioned, the 2-year is saying the Fed's going to make a dovish turn here very, very quickly. The 2 year's at 4.2%. What that means is currently the bond market's pricing interest rates below where the Fed funds rate is right now. So the Fed increased 400 basis points. Currently, as we're talking right now, the Fed funds rate, the overnight lending rate they provide to other banks, is at 4.375. The 2-year note is at 4.2. It's already below it. And it's well below the 5.1% that the Fed expects to get to by the year end 2023. So in the short term, the bond market is way more dovish than what the Fed actually is. So basically, the bond market's calling the Fed's bluff and saying, hey, you cannot continue to increase rates at this pace without completely disrupting the economy. Basically, the Fed chairman's got us all in a full Nelson right now, and the market's about to cry uncle.
Yeah.
And I think that he's doing this not because he doesn't see this data. I think that he's doing this to act like a tough guy, to make sure that Wall Street, specifically the very large companies, the very large tech companies, see their market cap go down, so they have to lay off people, because he's focusing now more on not data dependency from an inflation standpoint. He's looking at wage inflation, which this is where the real riff, for me kind of comes along. So I've said this all year long. The Fed has 2 main mandates: price stability, which is inflation, keeping inflation under control. He's probably not the price stability guy. There was a specific podcast for that. Go check it out. That was a lot of fun to riff on that one. But he's probably not the price stability guy because they got it wrong when they called inflation transitory. I bought that, by the way, with the supply chain mess, right? If you shut down a global complex supply chain where everybody does just-in-time inventory, and you shut it off for 2 years and you flip the switch back on and say, go back to work, of course, there's going to be supply chain bottlenecks that we're still kind of trying to unwind. So I bought that, that's what the reason for inflation, but that's not true. It's just simply not true. Because the other Fed mandate is maximum employment. And maximum employment, the Fed would define that at about 4% unemployment rate. Right now, we've been at 3.5 to 3.7 pretty much all year long. So the Fed's no longer data dependent on inflation, which is, what does data dependent even mean anymore is the question I would want to ask Mr. Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Like, what does the data dependency even mean to you anymore? Because this has been, the hill that you've been dying on all year long.
Right.
You probably have like Paul Volcker tattooed on the back somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, he wrote a book, Paul Volcker did. This is the guy that squashed inflation in the early 80s, right? When we had, 20% rates on the 30-year, bond, which is unbelievable. That'll never happen again, probably. And if it does, I'm selling all my stocks. I'm selling everything that I own, my cars, my clothes, everything that I can sell. And I'm going to go buy the 30-year, that's guaranteeing you 20% a year for 30 years. So that'll never happen again. So anyway, he jacked up rates, Volcker did, and that brought inflation back down to normal rates. And he wrote a book, Mr. Volcker did, called Keep At It. And you've heard the Fed chairman all year long saying, we got to keep at it. We got to keep at it. Well, you got the economy in a full Nelson here, and it's about ready to cry uncle in a big way. Actually, we might pass out and have to be airlifted off to a hospital.
Medevaced to,
Not even, it's funny, but it's not.
No.
Right? Because you got 2 mandates. One's price stability, probably not the price stability guy based on your track record. And secondarily is maximum employment. So here's the kicker. We peaked out on inflation this year at about 9.1%, right? That was peak inflation report numbers that we got back in the summer, right? Now we're over 2% down and falling fast, right? So you're going to say, Mr. Fed Chairman, that wage inflation is the issue, the main driver of keeping inflation quote unquote high or sticky or hot, whatever adjective that you want to use. Well, if inflation's been 8-9+% all year long, and workers are getting what, 5 to 7% bump in wages,
if
roughly.
Some places, I know many people who don't have a single raise.
Yeah, or maybe that's 3%, which is what it typically is.
Yeah.
You know, in my working history, working for larger companies, we typically get maybe like a 3 to 5% bump in pay at the end of the year if it was a good year. You know, and we weren't expecting like a big recession to come about. Working in the finance field, of course. So if inflation's peaking out around 9, and workers are getting what's called 5 to 7% increase in pay, and Social Security folks are going to get bump in pay too, right? Coming up here in January. So that's already been announced. There's still a gap there. There's still a gap of multiple hundreds of basis points between what inflation actually is and what people are getting paid. And on top of that, you're going to continue to jack up rates until people get laid off.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting laid off, and inflation's still higher than what it needs to be. Right? We want to get it back down to 2. It's going to get there. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we're definitely going to get there, in my opinion, a lot faster than what the Fed thinks. I think we'll probably be there towards the latter part of 2023. The Fed's not calling for that until maybe 2024, even 2025.
Oof.
Right? So he wants people to lose their job. Inflation's still high relative to where the actual target number for inflation is, which the Fed calls 2%. How is that actually deflationary?
Yeah.
If people are losing their job, that makes the country less productive. Therefore, gross domestic product numbers are not going to be as robust as it would be if all of those people were working. And oh, by the way, we're going to be getting a JOLTS report from November. That'll actually happen in early January. So in January coming up, and this is some pretty cool data here. Let me pull this up. So we're using data from LinkUp, and I got to give a quick shout out to Tom Lee and everybody out at Fundstrat. I doubt Tom's watching this particular show, but he's on CNBC all the time. He's got a lot of useful data here that we tend to quote quite a bit. So this is coming from LinkUp. They see a 4.1% decline in the JOLTS number, which is a forward-looking indicator of what the employment should probably look like. And this means that we're finally going to go below 10 million job openings for the first time, that we haven't seen that since early 2021. So the job market is in fact weakening, which is in fact what the Fed wants to have happen. However, rooting for people to lose their jobs in a high inflationary environment still, and it's coming down, right? You can see it at the gas pump. You can see it if you're a home builder, even though they're not building homes right now because interest rates are way too high. Like the real estate market's fallen off a cliff. I'm also a landlord, so I kind of understand that rates or rental rates are actually staying flat to coming down as well. So yes, the Fed is doing one thing well, which is destroying demand.
Right.
The reason why the market's selling off so hard post that awesome inflation report is because the Fed's talking about continuing to increase rates when all the economic data is screaming there is no need for it. It was ready for the 50 basis point hike in December. Arguably, did they need to do 50? I don't know. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, 50 basis points is fine. The market can handle it. It is handling it just fine. But to go out and say we need to be more aggressive and continue to raise interest rates, well, here's the other kicker. They admit there's a massive lag effect. When you increase rates at all, specifically the most that they've ever increased them in history, that should give you a little bit of pause and say, hey, guys, they've admitted we've increased rates more than we ever have in the history of mankind, but we're going to keep doing it just to do it, to act like a bunch of Paul Volcker wannabes. You know what I mean? And you want people to lose their job on top of that. That is the reason why the market's selling off. It has nothing else to do with any sort of issues with our banking system, which is what we had back in 2008. I mean, literally, people are positioned more negatively in their portfolio than they have since the great financial crisis in 2008. It has everything to do with the words that came out of the mouth on December 12th from our Fed chairman, Mr. Jerome Powell. Because if you have this massive, lag effect by increasing interest rates, and you're talking about continuing to increase rates when the market's saying, no mas, we don't need this anymore, right? that's obvious why we have a sell-off. Now, here's what he should have said, right? Because this is the honest truth.
Yeah.
He could have said, hey, guys, we got 2 straight months, month over month of inflation moving downward. What we're doing is working. He did say that. What he should have said is this, is I've talked about being data dependent all year long. Now we have actual tangible proof that what we've done so far with increasing rates is in fact working. We're slowing down demand. That's the only sledgehammer that they have to use is increasing rates, therefore to slow down demand. What he should have further said is that I understand, my colleagues and I understand that not only is this the fastest rate hike in the history of mankind, there's also a lag effect, typically 9 to 18 months before all the industries that make up the S&P 500 sector, so all 11 sectors, will finally feel the impact of these massive interest rate increases. The data is suggesting that what we're doing is working, but I am not confident that if I continue to increase rates, that I'll be able to pull off this soft landing that they've been talking about all year long. So what's the soft landing? Is where we've increased rates to a point where we bring down inflation at a pace that gets us back to a sustainable inflation rate without putting people out of work and breaking the economy. That's the soft landing. And the truth of the matter is he's actually set up perfectly for all the mistakes that they made with printing too much money during the pandemic, with calling all of that printing of money transitory when in fact it was not. It was very inflationary. And then being very late to the game to actually increase rates, like we talked about, their dot plot in January of 21 saying they're only going to increase rates by 80 basis points. We've done 400 basis points, right? You could have easily pointed to all that and said, what we've done so far is working. And the economy has held up very nicely. We have historically low unemployment rates, all of these important data points. And he could have simply said, I don't truly know what the real, quote, terminal rate is for the market. Therefore, because of the lag effect and the fact that what we've done has already worked and the stock market sold off 20% in the S&P and over 30% in the NASDAQ, I want to go into 2023 with the same data dependency mindset. We're going to get an inflation report in January. We're going to get a bunch of job information in January. Let's see what that looks like. I might have to increase rates a little bit again, depending on what that data tells me, right? But if I don't, I've talked about higher for longer, then we'll just kind of pause and let's get some additional data after that, going into March, April, because we got it wrong. At the beginning of 2021, we thought we were going to only increase interest rates by 80 basis points. We ended up doing 400 basis points. So I know because of the lag effect, I don't want to cripple the economy, right? We've got inflation going in the right direction. The economy's been very resilient this year. It's held up nicely. Unemployment still historically low. Let's go into 2023 with a little bit of a different mindset than we did at the beginning of 2022, where we had to surprise the market with a substantial amount of interest rate increases. Let's continue to be data dependent, because we'll get some jobs data in January. We'll get some inflation information early part of 2023 as well, early February. And let's let that data tell us whether or not we need to continue to increase rates, because I do not want to cripple the economy. Therefore, let's go into 2023 without the anticipation of rate increases. But hey, if the data suggests that we actually do in fact need to do so, then I will in fact pull the trigger to make that happen. That is the honest truth. The market participants would have respected the heck out of that.
Right.
Of course, you would have saw a major rally in markets because the first time the Fed would be coming out to say something like that. But the truth is, he wanted and felt like he had to act like a tough guy, even though the bond market, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, is calling his bluff every single day. It's still doing it right now. He felt the need to do that so that there wasn't this face-ripping rally before the end of the year. And he assumed that if he did say something like that, then all of a sudden financial conditions would loosen. Well, last I checked, the banks themselves don't get to make up interest rates that they charge customers, right? No. It's based on what the Fed is charging them on overnight lending standpoint. So this whole data dependency thing that he's been, standing on the hill this entire year, I've lost complete credibility for everybody that's in the Federal Reserve. When you're saying you're going to be data dependent, be data dependent,
Yeah.
Right. And just be honest. Like, hey, I can look up this information just like anybody else can.
Right.
They were actually running this show in December of 21 going into 2022 saying, yeah, we're going to increase interest rates a little bit. We've been at zero for like freaking 12 years. So 75 basis points wasn't now going to scare the market at all. And they end up doing 400. And then at the end of the year, still say, this is
Buckle
good information,
up.
but there's too many people that have a job is essentially what he said.
Yeah.
There's a wage inflation problem. Those folks, nobody in the working class, middle class, upper middle class, whatever, nobody in that category was the cause of inflation. None of them. It was the Federal Reserve and policy, right? I give you a little grace. We went through a global pandemic. You shut down a complex supply chain and economies around the world. Yeah, I could see the need for printing some money, but you printed $9 trillion. I mean, the most in humankind. And then to back that up with the most interest rate increases in the history of man.
Right.
Maybe you might want to be completely data dependent because you're just guessing at this point. You have no idea what the terminal rate is. You might have already eclipsed that at terminal rate.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that is the only reason that the stock market is selling up. It has nothing to do with banks, fundamentals, bad credit. I mean, none of those things exist like they did in 2001 and 2008 where there was a whole bunch of speculation. There was actually a financial crisis of a whole bunch of bad loans. So none of those things are the problem. The actual problem is policy. And the Federal Reserve did nothing to help themselves. The truth of the matter is they are in a situation where they could have looked like freaking heroes. All they had to do was just tell it like it is. And they would have gotten so much respect from everybody, including Wall Street. Yes, you would have saw a major rally. I would have personally benefited from that. I would have looked very, very intelligent because this is the kind of setup that I thought we would get to by the end of the year. And I have been nothing but data dependent. I don't know how else to go into a conversation with a client on a quarterly review or an annual review with guessing.
Yeah.
That's
you
what he's doing.
Clients.
I wouldn't have any clients. And unfortunately, Congress appoints Fed chair people. I guess we can vote for, people in office, of course. But that's the way that this whole thing works from a Federal Reserve standpoint. So that is my rant. I've been saving this. So I was in North and South Carolina all last week, meeting with new clients and prospects out there. Ton of fun. I had way too much barbecue. I love barbecue. I think I need a major pause from barbecue. So it was like a protein overdose down there in the Carolinas.
Nice.
However, I cannot have a meeting with a client without backing everything that I have up to say with data.
Yeah.
Right. And the Fed has all this data and then some, but yet they choose to continue to guess what they think the ultimate terminal rate should be. So with that, I've gotten a whole lot off my chest. I feel a lot better, a little lighter.
Good.
It's almost like a therapy session here when I get to do these types of podcasts with folks. So I appreciate you guys kind of sticking with me here and let me get that off my chest. Hopefully that made a lot of sense. If you got questions, comments, we'd love to address those in future podcasts. We do a happy hour on Fridays as well. You can send that to 513-630-2664, or you can go to my website, shepherdwm.com. Whole bunch of ways to get a hold of me there, including my direct email address. So with that...
Yeah, you can also leave questions in any of our social postings. If they're relevant to the podcast, we answer them on air.
Yeah, so if you go to the Facebook page, you go to Instagram, you go wherever.
YouTube.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Joshua Casey Garland, so you can find me there as well. You can post questions, and I'll make sure that we get those questions answered. So with that, would probably be a good time to transition to some questions that we have.
Yeah, we do. The text line's actually blowing up after that rant. So,
bring it on.
First couple, though, they're not... This is some topics maybe we haven't really touched on the show, if not ever, then in a while. So I want to get to these. So Sandra in Sand Gap wants to know, does the annual gift tax exclusion limit apply to stocks as well as cash? Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really good question. Actually, it's a timely question. So this time of the year... we get to a lot of the charitable types of things. Not to say that people don't do that throughout the year, but people are kind of looking at their tax situation a little bit more closely now, and they may be charitably inclined, and now they have to make some decisions. Specifically, like for us here personally at Shepherd Wealth Management, a lot of our clients are in fact retired,
Some of them are required minimum distribution age. So what that means, for those of you that may not know, the IRS, the government says at the age of 72 and older, if you have any pre-tax retirement accounts, which would be things like your 401ks, your traditional rollover IRAs, SEP, simple IRAs, those types of pre-tax retirement accounts, you have to start to take some money out of there, right? You're never required to take any money out of there before the age of 72, but the government wants you to start taking money out of those pre-tax retirement accounts. The reason why they want you to do that is so they can tax you on those dollars. And it's kind of a fair trade-off in a way. You know, don't get me wrong. I don't want to pay Uncle Sam any more than I ever have to. And I, in fact, go out of my way to find ways for my clients to save themselves money on taxes. But if you got to save for, let's say, 40 years inside of a 401k account, you're retired, you rolled that over to your own personal IRA account, and you got to keep that invested for another 8 to 10 years, and you never took any money out. You know, maybe you got 40, 50 years worth of savings and earnings growth that has never been taxed, right? Long period of time for growth there. And now the government's saying, okay, now you got to start to take out small percentages every year. The percentage goes up a little bit every year. So that's the required minimum distribution. Well, I have a lot of clients that come from the baby boomer generation, of course. Some of those folks have pensions. Obviously, they're getting Social Security. They're about to get another bump in Social Security. Some of them may be still part owners in a business or have rental properties or those types of things. What I'm getting at is a lot of those types of clients, they simply don't need that required minimum amount that the government asked them to take out of their retirement accounts. So let's say it's $30,000 that the government is asking you to take out of your retirement account. You're sitting here at the end of the year, December 20th, and now you got to make some decisions. So if you don't need that money, what I might advise from a financial planning standpoint is to utilize this gift tax exclusion, specifically if you have a favorite charity that you want to give this money to. So not necessarily, giving that money to Ezra or...
Oh, I'll take it.
Yeah, I know you will. And by the way, you can stand on the corner and just start stroking checks at $16,000 a clip to different people, different Social Security numbers, and it won't affect your taxes and it will not affect the person that receives that money. That's the annual gift tax limit. Anything over that, now you have to start worrying about the gift tax thing. Regardless, let's say you got a $30,000 required minimum distribution and you have not fulfilled all the charitable things that you'd like to fulfill for the year. Well, of course, you could take that $30,000 out of your IRA. You can put it in your checking account. That's going to be a taxable event, right?
Right.
If you were to take that $30,000 and write a check from your checking or savings account to that charity, of course, the charity is going to really love you for that and appreciate it. And of course, that's going to be something that's a tax deductible item on your personal tax return. But what you could have done to avoid, potentially having to do tax withholdings up front or worrying about how it might impact your taxes, why not gift some shares of stock? So if you got a position in that account, let's say your IRA's got a $50,000 position in Procter & Gamble. We're right here in the Cincinnati area. There's not too many people I know that either haven't worked at Procter & Gamble or at least own some Procter & Gamble stocks. So I'm just going to say that because it's here locally, but it could be any stock. And you got $50,000 in Procter & Gamble. Again, you don't need the $30,000 that the government's asking you to take out. You have a charitable donation you'd like to make, let's say to St. Jude's.
Right.
You can gift $30,000 worth of Procter & Gamble stock right out of the IRA, and it goes directly to St. Jude. So clearly there's no taxable event because you're gifting shares. You cannot withhold 10% of those shares and send it to the federal government, right? They're not going to take a portion of your shares of stock. Right? That's not how they operate. So here's the cool part for St. Jude. They get the charitable donation that you were going to make anyway, and because it's in the form of stock, St. Jude being a charitable organization, a 501c3, they can choose to hold on to those shares of stocks indefinitely if they want to and benefit from the growth of those shares, the dividends that those shares produce, and they can sell them anytime they want to in the future. They could sell them the day that you gifted it to them if they wanted to, and the reality is there's no capital gain or taxable event because, in fact, St. Jude is a charity. So you, as the person that made that gift in this example, you satisfied the government's required minimum distribution, and you got your charitable donation, and potentially a non-taxable event, depending on what your other income looked like. And plus, the charity gets to make all the decisions with those shares of stocks going forward. So they can hang on to them, benefit from growth, dividends, or just sell them, use the money right away for something they may need to use it for. And the charity themselves does not have to pay taxes on that. So it's a great question. It's a very timely question, and it's certainly something that we do advise on and look at with clients here locally. So this is a good one. I'm sure we got time for at least one more, though, Ez.
We do. We got time for one more. Brian's back from Shelbyville. Wants to know, the question is, would you please explain backdoor Roth contributions and how that might help someone during the end of their fiscal year?
Awesome question. So this is the financial planning stuff that gets me excited, no doubt. So backdoor Roth contributions. It sounds a little dirty.
A little bit.
Backdoor Roth contributions. So what does that mean?
Or
sounds
at least like it should be illegal.
Yeah, like we're doing something nefarious
Yeah,
here. Like
yeah.
we're going to do this, but we're going to try to not tell the government about it or something. So,
Yeah.
no, that's not what this is.
It's like, oh, he got busted for backdoor Roth contributions.
So here's the
dirty
cool,
dog.
Here's the cool thing. So I'm going to assume, married filing jointly here for this, but, we can go over numbers for single tax filers as well. I'm only going over this because I am a married person and, quite a few of my clients are as well. So here's the dealio. If you are a W-2 employee, so you have a paycheck, and let's say you are married and you file jointly, so married filing jointly, the IRS says if you made as a combined couple more than $214,000 in the year of 2022, you cannot make a direct contribution to a Roth IRA. Furthermore, for those married filing jointly and they have a traditional IRA, then you cannot make more, according to the IRS, you cannot make a tax-deductible contribution to an IRA if you make more than $129,000 filing jointly. So if you made, let's say, $250,000 in 2022, you're too wealthy, according to the IRS, to make a contribution to a traditional IRA and get a tax deduction. So what do? And you want to make a contribution to either of these accounts to benefit yourself long-term from a retirement standpoint, getting that money in a tax shelter type of account. So here's what you can do. Whether you're Warren Buffett or if you're me sitting here in the studio, it does not matter how much money you make. Anybody on the planet, or at least here in the United States, can make a contribution to a traditional IRA. It's just a question of whether or not you get the tax deduction, right? In this example, this couple makes too much money to get the tax deduction, but they can make, that contribution to the IRA account. And if they're under the age of 50, the IRA contribution limit in 2022 is $6,000. So let's say that you made $250 combined household income, and you want to make the $6,000 contribution to your traditional IRA account, knowing that you're not going to get the tax deduction. Well, why would you leave that $6,000 in that traditional IRA account without getting the tax deduction? Doesn't make any sense. So here's where the backdoor Roth comes into play. Anybody, regardless of income, can convert any amount of money they want to in that traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. Generally, when you do that, you would be paying taxes, right? Because you got money in this pre-tax IRA account that's grown maybe, tax deferred. You want to take some of that and put it into a Roth. Well, you would pay taxes on that amount. But that $6,000 that I put into my traditional IRA, well, that came from my checking account. That money's already been taxed. Mm-hmm. So now I moved it to the traditional IRA. I do not get the tax deduction. I know that when I make the contribution, I let it sit there for maybe a day, and then immediately I take that $6,000 and I do a Roth conversion of that $6,000. And because it's already been taxed in my checking account and I didn't invest it, there's no taxable event at all. So this is how people in the higher income brackets that don't qualify for tax deductible traditional IRA contribution and they make too much money to put it directly into a Roth IRA, this is what is known as a backdoor Roth contribution. The government can change this loophole anytime that they want to. They have not changed it, so have at it.
Do it.
And if this isn't something that you're comfortable with, give me a call, 513-630-2664, something that we advise on here at Shepherd Wealth Management. We have our own accountant team that we can also take a look at all things related to your personal tax situation as well. So with that, those are some awesome questions.
Yep.
I got to rant a little bit right before the holidays, so I appreciate you all allowing me to do that. I certainly hope this was beneficial. I'm sure there's a ton of people out there, just as confused as the rest of the world as to why after really good inflation information that we're still having difficult time here from a market performance standpoint. But hopefully that kind of clears it up. And the 2-year Treasury note is telling you that the Fed is full of it, and they're going to have to make a pivot here in the not so distant future. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, my name is Joshua Casey Garland. I'm the founder and CEO of Shepherd Wealth Management. I'm also a certified financial planner. We'll try to do another podcast right at the beginning of 2023.
Yeah, season 3 kicks off.
Very excited about that. We'll continue to do our Friday happy hours. So the happy hours, if you haven't caught that, 10, 15 minutes, just going over what happened that week, why it happened, what can we look forward to next week, or what does history have to say about all the information that we just received. We try to do that in a fun way. Grab your favorite beverage while you do that. It is a Friday happy hour, of course. But to all those that are watching, that follow the show, that have given us great feedback, that have asked questions, that are clients or not clients, certainly appreciate all of you very, very much. It allows us to do what we do here. This is the most fun I've ever had in the last, call it, nearly 2 years that we've been in business here at Shepherd Wealth Management. So certainly appreciate everybody for all your love and support. And I hope everybody has a great, happy, healthy holiday season. Happy New Year for those of you as well that will be driving around. Stay safe when you travel, and I hope you just enjoy this time with your family and friends. And don't forget to talk about the podcast. Maybe there's some folks around your dinner table here the holiday season that could benefit from this type of information. So with that, look forward to seeing you guys on Friday. Have a great rest of your week, and enjoy the holidays.